Okay, there we go. Welcome everyone to a webinar put on by the Oklahoma State Department of Education and our Office of Standards and Learning. I'm Jason Stevenson, the Program Manager of Secondary Education. And one of my responsibilities, joys, is providing support to secondary English language arts teachers. Our topic tonight is harnessing the power of generative AI in the English language arts classroom. And a week ago or so, sometime I sent out an email inviting you, giving you the option to review some slides from a past webinar and workshop that I'd done on AI. Since this really is representing a 3-hour workshop that I've done in person around the state over the past 4 or 5 weeks. And so this virtual version is only 90 minutes because I would never subject you to a 3-hour webinar. That's too long, even for us English teachers. So I do have a quick little QR code, not QR code, bit.ly link I'm going to put in the chat for all of you. I don't know if it's going to be clickable or not. I may have to go back. Let's see if this works. That works. So in the chat box, you'll see a quick little bit.ly link, and this is our attendance. And so if you'll complete that for me very quickly on your device, on the screen, you'll see the name of the session. You can just simply call it AI. Our subject area is ELA or secondary ELA, and then the location or event is a webinar. And so Monica, once you're able to take attendance, your colleague could do the same thing, or you could do it for her since they were having trouble getting logged in, if that works for you all. We'll do one more of these bit.ly links at the very end of our session. It'll be a quick evaluation. And at the end, it will give you the option to download a PD certificate for our time together, I believe. So we'll do that just one more time. And since we're a small, the bit.ly link was in the chat. Lindsay, I think you just joined, so let me put it in there again for you. Lindsay, there you go. Right there. That's attendance. We're a small enough group. Let's do a show of digital hands or real life hands. Either way, there is a raise hand feature. How many of you are already using AI in your work, in your classroom, in your current field of education? See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, a lot of us are already adopting it or at least trying it out. You can put your hands down if you want. But then would anyone be willing to come off mute and share how you're using AI already? And I promise I have content that I'll share with you all, but I kind of like to know where you're at in your AI journey. So anyone want to chat about how you're already using AI? You can also put your answer in the chat box. You don't have to come off mute if you'd rather just type away an answer.
I use it as foundation for lesson plans and alignment to a specific standard or part of standard. I've used it to outline unit plans. I've used it to give me a base outline of what I want to do for a professional development. And I definitely use it to fix my emails so no unintended tone or anything is in there.
Yes, very nice. So there's a lot of ideas provided right there from Natalie. Lesson planning, outlining, fixing tone in emails. And Lindsay said in the chat, using Canva AI to generate questions or activities for lesson slide decks. So the variety is helpful there. Thank you, Lindsay, for sharing. Okay, to kind of ground us, and I realize now you all are still seeing my screen, and that's okay. I want to start with this video, which I never shared in any of my in-person workshops. There was pushback against Google for this commercial that aired during the Olympics last year. And I won't say why there was pushback because I want to know what you all think the pushback was. So the commercial is still available on YouTube. It was just pulled from the airwaves during the Summer Olympics. So let me enter back into play mode. And hopefully you all can hear the sound. If not, please let me know. And we'll try to get that fixed. Ta-da.
My little girl's always been a runner, just like me. I've always thought
Can you all hear the sound? Yes. Okay, I'll keep going.
she was following in my footsteps. Hey, go get her, baby. But lately, she's been looking up to someone else. She might even be the world's #1 Sydney fan. And like Sydney, she's focused on her technique. Good job, baby. Accelerate out the curve. High knees, high knees. There you go. She wants to show Sydney some love, and I'm pretty good with words, but this has to be just right. So Gemini, help my daughter write a letter telling Sydney how inspiring she is. And be sure to mention that my daughter plans on breaking her world record one day. She says, sorry, not sorry. You got this. Let's go.
Okay, maybe you have an idea already about why there was pushback against Google for this commercial. Maybe you have no idea why. I think, hey, that seemed fine to me. What was everyone's problem? But I'd love to hear some thoughts, discussion on why there might have been pushback. Because this kind of gets to the heart of, or the philosophy of, how and when to use AI. And Kelly got us started already in the chat. She said, at the very least, the dad should have let his daughter enter the prompt into Gemini. Lindsay says, it takes the heart out of the act of writing. And then Hannah says it takes the skill of letter writing out of the students' hands. I think we got some English teachers in the room. You all are getting to the heart of the matter here, that the student, the girl, the fan of this Olympian, was totally cut out of the process, at least how the commercial depicted it. It was the father who wrote the prompt, and did not seem to involve his daughter at all. We were never even shown the daughter trying to write this letter. And so to see the daughter totally cut out of the process, I think it upset quite a few people who provided pushback and ultimately led to Google removing this from the air. Now, would anyone like to come off mute and add to the discussion that's already happening in the chat, or push back against anything anyone said? Because this is a safe space. We can have debate. Lindsay, I'm going to pick on you, and you don't have to turn your camera on. But if you'd like to say more in the chat or come off mute, I want to know more about what you meant by it takes the heart out of the act of writing. Would you be able to share just a tiny bit more on that? Or Emily, you could share. Go for it. I see your virtual hand raised. Let's see, the mute button will be on the microphone button. There you go.
Yeah, I was clicking on my icon. I'm a Zoom person, so
Sure. This is harder or different.
Y'all are speaking a different language. So I think that it's a two-way street on this. I think if you're going to invest yourself into writing something to a person that you find inspirational, like that's the generation of the feeling, and so putting yourself into what you're writing, like that's the whole point. It's almost like that psychological exercise. If you've lost a family member and you're going through the levels of grief and everything, sometimes writing the letter to them, even though they can't read it, it helps you. That's the point of the writing. And then I was thinking, as I was looking at that, I'm going, that's a lesson for me as a teacher, to make the writing assignments have something that my students can put heart into. That's what I mean by saying it's a two-way street. Like AI is going to, change our students' concept, or is changing our students' concept of what their obligation is to writing. So that makes it turn around to fall to us to put the heart back into a writing prompt, make them feel like it's something that they need to contribute to. They want to get those ideas out there, instead of just like, sort of the prototypical, like, what did I do on my summer vacation? Those sort of generic essay prompts. We want to go further and make it more authentic for them.
This was an opportunity for this young girl to have a authentic writing opportunity to her hero, and to see the father wrest that away from her and feed a prompt into an AI engine. It kind of makes that whole purpose or heart of why we write and what makes us human get too automated. And certainly AI can be used sometimes to help us brainstorm, to help us maybe think through different revision techniques or editing writing, but to just churn out the letter and totally cut out the human aspect, I think that's why so many people had a visceral reaction. And Lindsay, you explained that quite well, so thank you for speaking up. Emily, I noticed your hand virtually went up. Maybe you just click the button. If at any point you do want to chat, just come off mute and we'll give you the floor. Where do we want to go from here? I've got over 100 slides. I think I want to go here because this is something else I never got to. No worries, Emily. Share in my in-person workshop. So I'm just sharing all my content I never got around to with you all here on this webinar. So what we're seeing now on the screen is a drawing that a French artist made over 100 years ago in 1900, predicting the year 2000. And so here we are even 25 years later, and looking at this image of a school, because that's what the caption reads at the bottom left. And I'd spent a long time since I had college French, but l'école, I'm sure someone could correct me there. That's Jean-Marc Cote's prediction of schooling in the year 2000, based on his inferences he could make in the year 1900. So my questions that we could discuss, or anything else that bubbles to the surface: how is school in 2025 like and unlike this picture? And or how might the role of AI lead to or away from this type of education? So I'll give you a moment to take in the picture and to think through a response to either question. And you can certainly toss your answer into the chat box, and or we can have a discussion and come off mute. Either way.
They predicted that learning would be passive, which it very much can be if you're talking about lower Bloom's type learning, where you could Google it and you have that information, so you don't spend a lot of time there. It is very passive, but we still take an active, more engaged role than what's depicted here, especially now that we push ourselves to those higher upper Blooms.
So it depends on the level of Bloom's taxonomy, um, whether this picture is real life or not. It looks like Lindsay said in the chat, read about a virtual reality school in Florida that this drawing brought to mind. And then Hannah points out this image gives the idea learning is not necessarily about the process, but rather the absorption of information and the output or performance of the students. And then Emily says, I sort of love that first prediction of school in the future. It still has so much of Cote's present. It was difficult for him to see beyond his present time. So I think maybe with that we need to get into some of the tools and tips and tricks and thoughts on generative AI and its place in the ELA classroom. So I'll make the screen larger and remind us that artificial intelligence has been around for a number of years now. One of the common tools on many of the Apple smartphones. And I won't say her name because my smartphone is right here next to me on my desk and I don't want to activate her or it. But it can predict weather, it can give driving directions, it can call someone for me. And these are computer program tools. Then generative AI is a more specific kind of artificial intelligence that can create synthetic, human-like text or images or even songs. That's what Suno does. Suno, at the request of a prompt, can create a 90s pop ballad about prepositions. Or anything that we would ask it to do. And then a specific type of generative artificial intelligence tool is the large language model, and that one creates exclusively text-based, human-sounding writing, and one of those tools is ChatGPT. It's the most famous one. So for now, I'd like us to look at Suno. I wasn't able to do this at the summer webinar on AI, and I think I'd like us to create one together, and then I might give you a little time on your own to create a song on this website. So it's just suno.com, suno.com, and you get so many free credits per day on this website, and the song description is limited to how many characters, to a certain number of characters, but it will create some potential songs for us. So is there anyone in the Teams call who has an idea for a song? It can be ELA related or not. Then you can give me a genre of music to use, the topic for the song, and then we're going to make some connections on how we could possibly use Suno in our English classrooms. Since The Outsiders musical is so popular and opened in Tulsa recently, let's do something with The Outsiders. And that was in the wasn't that in the 60s? When did The Outsiders take place? So the prompt is going to be '50s. Okay. Write a '50s song about Ponyboy Curtis, the main character from The Outsiders, and how he changed. And then do we have a more specific genre of song we want it to try to do? Like rock and roll? Let's do rock. To me, '50s feels...
50s was the dawn of rock and roll, so it makes sense.
Okay, let's do this. Create. So in the past, when I used Suno, it would always create 2 versions of the song. The lyrics were the same, but the melody might be a little bit different, or the syncopation, the rhythm might change. What they are doing now, in order to make money, because we do live in a capitalist country, right? There are better versions that you can unlock if you pay money. So you'll see on the right-hand side, upgrade for full song. So we can hear a short clip of these so-called better versions if we want. I just ignore those and play one of the free versions. So I'm going to pull that up and see if I can't get the song. And you all can decide if this meets the prompt or not.
Tough streets screaming, lights all low, pony boy running, nowhere to go. Leather jackets, fire in the night, holding dreams, gripping them tight. Stay gold, pony boy, stay gold. Heart of fire, but the world's so cold. You're changing, breaking, fighting to hold. Stay gold, pony boy, stay gold.
I'm not completely mad at this song. So we won't listen to the rest of it, but we can see on the screen verse 2, the lyrics are, saw the sun rise, it hit your face, felt the weight of a world misplaced. If you've taught The Outsiders, read it recently, you know at the beginning of the novel, the very first line is something along the lines of, when I stepped out of the darkness of the movie house, the first, 2 things on my mind, Paul Newman and a ride home. So that mention of the sun rising, I think, is encapsulated there. Okay, let's quickly put in the chat or debrief off mic or off mute thoughts on Suno, and then I'm going to give you time to explore it and try a prompt of your own. Go ahead, Kelly.
So I teach an elective called digital storytelling, and we create a student-produced news program every week in video format. And my students take the titles of the stories and they plug it into Suno, and then we make an intro song that fits exactly what the stories are. Or if we're doing like the school announcements for the week, we put the announcements in,
Cool.
and then they all end up in a song, and it's a lot of fun. I love
fun.
it.
The kids like it and they enjoy
Yes.
it. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that application of using Suno already. So for the rest of you, maybe you haven't used Suno yet, I want to give us just a little bit of time to play around with the website. So the link to it is in the chat. Pull it up. I think you may have to create a free quick account, and then you'll click on the create button let me go ahead and share my screen one more time, show you where to go. So it's over here on the left, your menu's on the left. When you hit create, that is where you'll see the different prompt, or see the prompt box, and then you'll click this create button at the bottom. So I'll give you like 3-4 minutes to play around with Suno, and we'll share some classroom implications. What assignments or activities could we potentially use with this, or what standards, academic standards, could we leverage through Suno? And then if anyone has a really good one they want to share, we'll have time for that too. So I'll put about 3 minutes on the timer on my screen and give you time to play around. If you're having trouble, let me know. I'll try to help. Okie doke, that's been 3 minutes. Maybe you've had enough time to create a song in Suno or see its capabilities. I'd love for anyone to share in the chat or talk right here on this webinar about what type of prompt you used, what type of song you got, or share any classroom applications there might be for using Suno in your English class. And Kelly's already shared how she uses it with her students. Any thoughts on Suno? Well, based on what other people have said at the in-person workshops, whenever we discuss, they thought it could be leveraged in a number of ways in their English classes, whether it would be to teach a skill to their students to make some catchy tune about some topic that was maybe difficult for students to grasp, whether it's a grammar or language skill, something along those lines. Or to have students create songs that would go along with character analysis for a piece of literature that students were reading and analyzing. So those are just some ideas. Anyone want to share their Suno song with the group? Cynthia, yes, you probably would have had to have created an account in order to make a song. But it should be a free account. You don't have to pay anything. All right, well, I'm going to share the screen then. Ta-da. And we'll pull up these GenAI tools. Lots of companies have lots of GenAI tools. You see all these on the screen. Google Gemini, Claude, Microsoft has Copilot. There's also Perplexity, Poe, and then the famous or infamous Chat GPT. So maybe you've used one or two of these. Maybe you're aware of all of these and you've tried them out for different reasons based on your prompt for what you needed. Claude does have a requirement that you be 18 years old or older. If you teach in a Google school district, Google Gemini might be embedded in some of your different tools, emails, what have you. Same goes if you're a Microsoft district. Copilot might be kind of a default tool that your district allows you to use. Now, they may or may not have these turned on for your students, and you also might be from a district that blocks some or all of these tools. It just depends because each district is a bit different. But I want to give us some time to explore some of these tools. So we're going to look at some prompt engineering next. Let me find it for us. I've lost it though. There we go. So let's go here. Now you do not have to be this specific every time you feed a prompt into a generative AI website or tool, but it can be helpful to get you really specific results. And so the acronym we use is PARTS. P stands for persona, so it's always helpful to state your role. A stands for aim, so you state your objective, and if it is for a lesson plan, you can just copy and paste the actual Oklahoma Academic Standard into your prompt. Recipients would be your audience, so the grade that you teach. If you're, again, looking for a lesson plan, idea. T stands for theme, where you can state your style, tone, or any other parameters. And then S stands for structure. So you can state the length or the format or what have you. And I got this idea from my colleague, Dr. Karen Leonard, who is in charge of ed tech for our state. So here would be a sample parts laid out with all of those specifics. You could state you're an 8th grade ELA teacher, the objective that you're wanting a lesson plan for, that it would be for students, and then if you've got a specific type of student that you're wanting to target in your lesson plan, like an English learner, you could list that as well. And then the theme would be authentic examples or application to writing during a unit about the outsiders. Again, we're circling back to that. Common text here in Oklahoma, because the author was in fact a student here in Oklahoma when she wrote it. Then the structure would be a lesson plan. So here's the prompt that I used, and it's just a written out version of the table that we saw on the previous slide. And I fed this to Claude. Claude is one of those GenAI, generative artificial intelligence tools. And I will show you what Claude produced. It made a lesson plan for me with a duration of 50 minutes. It provided learning objectives, the materials needed, an opening hook, display these two sentences. The Socias jumped Ponyboy was jumped by the Socias. And then ask students to engage in a think, pair, share. What's the difference between these sentences? Which one sounds more direct and why? How does the focus change between the two? And for my English learner support, there are sentence frames provided for students as well. So then there's direct instruction provided, more direct instruction because this is a pretty beefy objective. It's got misplaced and dangling modifiers and active and passive voice all in one objective. And then there's some creative writing connections should you want to do that, and an exit ticket. You will notice that students are fixing these problematic sentences. Scared and alone, the park became dangerous. So a better, more correct sentence would be scared and alone, Ponyboy found the park dangerous. However, if we go back to our objective, we'll see that 8th graders were only supposed to recognize these things, not correct them. That's actually a skill that 9th graders do. So the standards were kind of built in a stair-step sort of way where 8th graders get used to finding these things, but then 9th graders actually correct them. And maybe that is a good way to structure this. Maybe it should have been that 8th graders were also fixing it. But because I did not feed that exactly into this prompt, all I said was I want a lesson about these things. I didn't say identifying them. The lesson had students going beyond the scope of the standard. So you need to be careful what you feed into any of these GenAI tools. Plus, we can't always trust everything that they produce. They do get things wrong sometimes. They hallucinate. But this time, the problem was me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me because I did not have a clear enough prompt. But now it's your turn. I'd like you to feed a prompt to one of these GenAI tools. It can be about a classroom task you have. It doesn't necessarily have to be a lesson plan. It can be something else. But once you feed it to one tool, once you've got your prompt written out, and you can follow the PARTS acronym if you want. If you don't want to and you kind of want to freestyle your prompt, that's also okay. But feed it into one of these websites, and then once you get a response, I want you to take the exact same prompt and feed it into a second website to see which website you think does a better job answering your prompt. And so that you're not having to type all of these. You know what I should do? Let me just share I'm going to share my slides with you all. This does mean you can just have free reign and totally go off script if you feel like it and want to go off on your own. But if you'll go to slide 63, that's where we're at right now. And hopefully you can pull the slides up. So these are all hyperlinked. I know they're not blue with underlines, but if you click on those websites, then it'll pop up again and you can click it and it'll take you to where you need to go to try out a prompt in at least 2 of these different tools. So I'll give you some time to do some prompt writing and some prompt exploring. Please let me know if you need any help. I'll be hanging out. I think I want to give us at least 5 minutes for this. So if you're not sure what you're supposed to be doing, the instructions are in the chat box. They're also on the screen. And we still have 3 minutes left. Hopefully you've got a prompt figured out by now. Go ahead and drop it into one of these 6 AI tools. Evaluate the results and then take that same prompt and drop it into a second tool and compare and contrast it with the other.
You're such a good, like, daughter-in-law. You know that? You think about us a little more. Like, thank you, and And I said, I'm like the first in-law in both sides of the family.
Hi, Sharmila. You might mute yourself, and you're currently on a little task.
I am a daughter, and I'm one of the oldest in the entire my dad's side of the family. He goes, that's a lot of pressure. Yes, I know, and it's true. Like.
You did. Okay, we've got about 30 seconds or so left. Some of you might be finished already. So our learning can happen in our share outs and our observations. So not everyone at once, but let's hear some thoughts on which tool or tools you used and what the results were from the prompt that you created and tried out in one of these websites. Go for it, Hannah. Thanks for raising that digital hand. You can come off mute in the upper right corner by clicking the microphone. There you go.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Hannah. I am a virtual English teacher with Edmond Public Schools. I just work with their like virtual admin program specifically, and I have a wide variety of grades. I have 6 through 12. Um, and so I ended up using Claude and Gemini for my prompt, and the prompt that I fed it was, I'm a virtual English teacher for ninth graders, and I asked it to create a 10-minute independent pre-writing activity for ninth graders focused on the skill of writing a persuasive essay, specifically on the skill of creating an effective tone. Because that's something I see a lot is working on tone with different um, forms of writing. And I am I've played around with AI a lot because it's something that we have to be aware of in the virtual setting. But Claude is a newer one to me. I've used Gemini quite a bit, and I like both of the outcomes, except I noticed specifically with Claude, um, so it did give a detailed sort of um, description of what is tone and persuasive writing, and it had 3 different parts about um, read 3 different versions of the same argument and then how to identify a different tone in each one, which I think is great. But then the thing that I think is cool about Gemini's output too is that it gave an application in terms of the practice application for the students, that it gave a tone type. So like an aggressive tone versus a neutral tone, or
Sure.
versus a respectful tone, and it wants the students to write an example sentence or an example what is the word?
Paragraph.
Yeah, like an example starter sentence, but just testing it out with the different tone styles, which I thought was really nice. It just seemed like one of them tended to be focused more, Gemini seemed to be focused more about around one specific argument or topic, and then which might be good for introducing a topic because then it kind of only brings in one um example. But then Claude did give other examples too, which I thought was helpful too. So if you needed
Really
a
helpful.
variety of examples, yeah. So,
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's always an exciting time teaching argument to high school students because they might use it against us, right? But
yes, the bias
kind
versus unbiased thing is a thing that I'd like to teach a lot with those
yeah,
kiddos.
uh, kind of one of the hopes for me from this activity was for you all to see like, hey, there can be a little good in each of these tools, and maybe I can bring it all together in my own lesson that I ultimately design, because there might be ideas sparking from each of these. So Hannah, thank you for sharing your prompts, your two different outputs. Would anyone else like to share? Hannah talked about Gemini and Claude. Maybe someone used a different tool or set of tools for their prompts and wouldn't mind sharing with the group. All right, Cynthia, let's hear it. Uh-oh, we can't hear you. At least I can't. Let's see. It doesn't say you're on mute, though. I wonder if there's a button to press or something to turn on your computer itself somewhere. If your microphone got turned off somehow. We'll let Cynthia keep working on that, and I will read what Nancy said in the chat. Claude is still spinning. However, Gemini created a 50-minute lesson plan to identify types of suspense in the short story The Monkey's Paw, and it had decent results. Cynthia, we might just circle back to you whenever you can get that technology thing figured out. Okay, would anyone else like to share before we move on?
Okay, I liked that Claude had this like generative let us pick a prompt for you aspect. Uh, I thought that was really interesting. And you know, when you hit a brain freeze and having an AI like give you a way out of it, it was interesting to me.
Okay. Just kind of how the Claude homepage worked, or what was it exactly that it?
When you first log in, it says, pick 3 topics, and then it goes
Oh,
into one of the topics is let Claude choose. And so the prompt I messaged you this, but the prompt it gave me was um could you craft a manifesto that captures the essence of my boldest ideas?
wow,
Right?
intense.
I'm like, that's not a softball prompt.
That's fascinating. So let's think about using these tools for another way in the English language arts classroom, which would be to do some revision. And Cynthia, if you get it to work at any point, please just interrupt and we'll go for it. But you can use generative AI to provide feedback on drafts of writing, whether it's a partial draft or a complete draft. You can ask for very generic feedback or specific feedback. And if students are, if you're going to let students do this, they do need to be careful not to reveal any personal information in the text they submit. They could replace names with just the letter of the first name. Same goes for like a city and that kind of thing. You can also turn off the training data in the settings for the particular tool that you're using. But I'm going to show you my writing process, my revision process for a poem that I wrote recently in response to a Polaroid that fell out of my father's grandfather's Bible that his Aunt Stinky, that is her nickname, not her real name, sent to him. And so I wrote a poem based on that Polaroid, that black and white picture. And then I just gave the prompt to ChatGPT, give me feedback on my poem based on an old photograph that I will also upload. Because ChatGPT and some of the other tools also have the ability to upload an image, a PDF, whatever, for it to analyze. I did notice in the feedback ChatGPT gave me on this, it didn't really seem to reference the photo at all. So that is my father in the center of the photo right here. This is my grandpa, my dad's dad with his back to the camera. And then this is my dad's grandpa, my great-grandpa, with his hand on top of my dad's head. And so I wrote a poem called Legacy, and I'm going to share with you very quickly, inflict some of my poetry on you all. And then we'll see what ChatGPT said about my draft. And this is called Legacy. In the crinkled photo stamped 56, my father gazes over his father's shoulder on the back porch where 2 fishing poles and a rifle perch on the white wall. His thin toddler hair is long enough for a trim. His first haircut, his grandpa's hand cupping his crown while he snips his neckline. My grandpa's dark hair is military cut, no sign of the loss to come. His back to the camera in striped overalls, looking at his son's calm face. My great-grandpa tilts his head, purses his lips as he works, his sunken and serious eyes handed down to his son, grandson, and sooner or later, me. So that was the draft. And ChatGPT and a lot of these tools are originally programmed to be very complimentary, very helpful. They want to be nice or they want to help. And so I have to take everything that ChatGPT says with a grain of salt. And I also have to keep in mind that, if I want real human feedback, I've got a writing group. I've got people I could ask as well. But whenever there's 30 students and only one of you in just 1 hour of the day, and they're all wanting feedback on a draft, a GenAI tool could maybe point out a few things that you also would have pointed out. So ChatGPT said, this is a beautiful layered draft. It feels like you've captured both the intimacy of a family moment and the weight of lineage that photographs often carry. Here's some detailed feedback. And it goes into strengths. It likes the title. It likes the concrete imagery, the generational layering, the tone. It calls the tone gentle, reverent, but not sentimental. And the restraint works well. And then it goes into suggestions for revision. It says a few places could breathe more, and it calls out the use of parentheticals, saying it's a bit abrupt. Maybe it could just be folded into the poem without the need for parentheses. And it says the verb choice of perch for the rifle and fishing poles is interesting, but maybe too lighthearted for these particular objects. Test out another verb, maybe lean or rest or hang. And I liked perch, and I thought it was a vivid verb, and I liked that it's also a word for a fish. and it was about fishing poles. But maybe that was too punny. So, you have to take everything in and decide, do I really believe this AI bot or not? Because this is not a real person telling me these things. It has been programmed with lots and lots of human text, lots and lots of uh, words, and it's just churning out ideas for me to consider. Now, I did wonder how clear was the poem on which he is who, which who is he, him, grandpa, great grandpa, my father, but my father's father. Oh, but it's my dad's grandpa. So their clarity of relationships could be stronger. And then the tension or subtext of the phrase, no sign of the loss to come. ChatGPT picked up on that phrase saying, hey, this is poignant, but maybe a bit vague. Maybe you could hint a little more strongly about what this loss is. Is it illness or hardship or absence or even death? So there's the picture again. There's my grandpa with his back to the camera. And I kind of took in everything that ChatGPT said. I did think it was funny about the no sign of the loss to come, because I inherited my dad's bald spot, and my dad got it from his father. But in this picture, my grandpa has a full head of hair. But I've got the spot. My grandpa had the spot too. And that was the sign of the loss to come. It was nothing super deep or meaningful. I just didn't want to say bald spot in the poem. So I ended up and I cut that out in my final draft here. I did decide to get rid of perch and swap it for rest for alliteration instead of doing a pun choice. I did get rid of the parentheses. And you'll see in this stanza, I brought in the detail that my grandpa leans left in a wooden chair looking at his son's calm face. Back to the camera in striped overalls, dark hair, military cut. So I kind of reevaluated the picture, the photo, and noticed more details. It is striking to me, you all don't know my grandpa, but my great grandpa in this picture, who I've seen very few photos of, he's almost a carbon copy of my grandpa. They look so remarkably similar. And now my dad is getting old enough, he looks like that old man in the photo. And it weighs a lot. It's a meaningful photo to me. But thinking about all those men in my family, I also thought of my grandmother, because she is the one who gave my dad the blue eyes that are right there dead center. I know it's a black and white photo, but I know those eyes are blue. And so that's how I changed the poem the most, was by introducing my grandmother in the final stanza that I added after thinking through all the recommendations from ChatGPT and deciding what it could and could not tell me to do for revision. But who took this picture? My grandma, of course, whose blue eyes sparkle on my father's round face, even in this faded black and white Polaroid. So that's where I took things, with revision ideas from a large language model. And so now I want to give us time, and thank you, Nancy, for the compliment, to reflect on how we might use, or how our students might use, a large language model as a thought partner during revision, or any stage of the writing process. Would this be something you would consider doing only in a pinch? Should this be something that all students have the opportunity to do if they so choose? And Kelly's got her virtual hand raised, so the floor is yours, Kelly.
Are you familiar with classcompanion.com?
I feel like I've heard of it, but not super familiar. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
It is a really great site for this. Classcompanion.com, you can put in, you can generate a task, and you can set up either multiple choice, which wouldn't work for this, or short answer or essay, and then generate a rubric. And when the kids log in, they answer the question in a box, And when they hit submit, the AI generates feedback for it.
Okay.
And then they get a second chance to redo the answer using the AI feedback. And I've used that a lot on like a Friday test so that they practice, like, okay, you did a great, a lot of times kids, they think their first writing is the best writing and they don't want to change
They don't
anything on that.
revise.
Well, it pops up a score based on the rubric. You'll get a 3 out of 8 on this, but you could try these things and maybe get a better score. And then they try those things and they get a better score. And that's been useful just because I can't sit beside all 28 freshmen and give them one by one feedback on everything. So this gives them at least a place where they practiced revision before we get to sitting down and having a writing conference with me.
Thank you for sharing the website with us there,
Yeah, it's great. I couldn't live without it now. If I had one tool, that would be the tool I would get.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you,
it's
Kelly.
really popular with my teachers. They love it. And then they love that kids have to direct type into it and things like that. And of course, there's different levels, pay and free.
Okay, but also class companion, Natalie. Okay, Hannah, your hand's up. Go for it.
So I was also going to praise Class Companion because I learned about it at my first professional development this year, like with my district. And since we are in the virtual setting, um, obviously there's a lot of AI use, and I wanted to provide them with that tool rather than to have them seek it out themselves with one that I know is reliable and that I would recommend using. Um, but the thing I was also going to add that I like about it as well for the virtual setting is specifically with our program, we have a lot of students who will um, maybe come virtual temporarily for a short period of time and then they will go back in person. So we have I think we have close to 1,000 kids in virtual. Right now I have 330 students and I think I'll get 200 more for block three. It adds up. And so especially I try to give as much detailed feedback as I can, but then having something like this is also amazing because it can give them the instant feedback. Like I'll have high schoolers who work at 2 in the morning and I'm asleep. I can't give them feedback. So they have something that will give them
There you go.
active feedback. The thing I also love about it is it has statistics built in for each student or for your classroom so that you can go look at a specific student who's turned in, all or many of their writings. And if they decide to go back in person, there's been times where I've had the school reach out to me and say, "Hey, this student is coming to us. I just would like to know where they're at with their writing. What are some of their areas of strengths and areas of improvement?" And it will generate that feedback using AI, and I can actually create that PDF and send it to that teacher that will be receiving that student middle of the year, middle of the semester, and say, "Hey,
Wow.
this is the rundown of where their areas of strengths and improvements are." So that's kind of like they're not coming in blind with, I don't know anything about where this student's skill set and writing is. And so I love it as I love it. I love so many things about it, but I also really love the personalized data and feedback it can give you per class or per student too, because I think that's a really helpful thing to have, especially for students who, you need a baseline of their skills too. So highly recommended.
Thank you, Hannah. I mean, this was not a tool I put in my slideshow to share around the state, but I'm glad you all knew about it already, and the rest of us on the call who are unaware, we can familiarize ourselves with Class Companion. And then in the chat, looks like Nancy said she'd be more comfortable allowing students to use a large language model to help students with poetry, as freshmen seem to struggle with moving from concrete expression to symbolism in figurative language. Have not tried Class Companion, but they do have Brisk, and I have heard of Brisk. I don't use it a whole lot in my work. Anyone else want to share how you might use a large language model for any stage of the writing process? I think we will move on then. How many of you are familiar with Notebook LM from Google? Kelly is. Anyone else? Okay, let me share my screen. So we can leverage generative AI as a research assistant as well. Standard 6 research is one of our overarching standards in the Oklahoma Academic Standards for English Language Arts. There's both the reading strand and the writing strand. And Notebook LM from Google can act as your personalized research assistant. What you can do is find websites that you know to be reputable, reliable, valid, current, and feed all of them into Notebook LM. And then it will synthesize and summarize all those different sources into a topic for you. And then there are studio tools that you can then use to have a deeper dive into that topic. One of them is an audio overview, which is essentially a 10 to 15 minute podcast in which synthetic voices, a man's and a woman's, talk about your topic. You can also create reports, mind maps, flash drives, all about this topic. So the example that you see here on the screen in Essays Borrowed Shell is about hermit crab essays, which take on the form of different types of writing, be it Chad Simpson's Let X short story, which is actually an algebraic equation, Amy Cross Rosenthal's Encyclopedia of an Ordinary Life, which is a memoir but structured like encyclopedia entries that are cross-referenced and include illustrations, charts, and graphs, and so on. So it can be quite the handy-dandy tool whenever you're trying to get into the nitty-gritty of a topic. Students could explore the audio overview based on the resources that they feed this tool, and then decide how accurate the podcast is, what voice was left out and should have been included, or what topics were left out based on their own personal knowledge of the topic. So I have the website for us here. I'll just put it in the chat. I know you all have access to the slides as well, but it's a Google program or a Google tool. And so your task or your challenge is to, for the next 5 minutes or so, look for 5 sources, be they websites or PDFs or YouTube links about any topic of interest that you have, and see if it'll create a nice synthesis for you on that topic, as well as to generate that audio overview, which is like a podcast. And it looks like Kelly's sharing how she uses this already to create a 5-minute weekly preview of the week's skills. So she shows her students on Monday, and then also sends this overview to students' parents so they know what students are learning this week. I do need to show you all very quickly on the screen how Notebook LM works. So if you're creating a new one, you're going to see this page pop up. You can upload sources. This is where you would upload PDFs. If you are a Google school or have a Google account, you could add documents from your Google Drive here in the bottom left corner. And then this is where I was thinking you would probably add most of your resources. It's on the website. So this is where you would paste the URLs of various websites to then build out your notebook. So I'm going to stop sharing and give you all a little bit of time. Maybe a topic related to your current ELA unit or an upcoming unit. going to make one quickly as well while you all make one. And I'll put the timer on for 5 minutes while we explore this tool. And we've got about 14 seconds left, so I'm going to just click out of my timer. And I'll share first. I'll show you my new notebook that I made in this time. And then we'll hear from one of you if you're willing to share. So I'll be leading a poetry writing workshop next month with Red Dirt Poetry in Oklahoma City at Literati Press. And the poems are all about food. Um, some are happy poems, some are sad poems. So I just put the links to the poems if they had a website, or if they were poems that I had typed up, including one of my own, I just copied the text in. So there are 8 different sources that Notebook LM used to generate this, and it picked out a little dinner plate with fork and knife as the emoji for this notebook and titled it A Poetry Feast, Food, Family, and Memory. What's interesting to me, the summary is a bit off. It just talks about 3 of the 8 poems. It doesn't address all 8, and it doesn't synthesize the entire crop of sources. But beneath it, it did have pre-made questions for the notebook to explore, which I decided I wanted it to do. So I just clicked on it. And so the question was, how do the poets use culinary and dining imagery to convey deeper themes? And so it started generating answers, and you'll notice there's little numbers after some of the answers. So those are the sources. And so they're kind of cross-referenced there. So that's cool. And then I also did create an audio overview. It probably spun for 2.5 minutes. But if I click play...
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking your source material, mostly essays and poetry this time, and we're focused...
It's none of those are essays. They're all poems. So it's already gotten something wrong. Fair, that's fine.
Completely on food, on eating.
Right. And not just food as fuel. We're treating these texts almost like maps, emotional, cultural maps.
So the mission today...
So they go on from there for 9 more minutes. I am going to listen to this podcast or summary tomorrow just to see how accurate it is and see if it prompts any other thinking on how I might lead that poetry writing workshop next month. All right, would any of you be interested, willing to talk about your notebook, what it created, what it got right, what it got wrong? Hopefully you see its power as a research assistant. And even if it's not something that you share with students, it might be something helpful to you in your own classroom practices if you've got something you're researching for a lesson. Go ahead, Nancy. You can share or ask your question.
Okay, so I just put in a discovery focus on kind of how much water it takes to recycle plastics. And it was a pretty vague prompt, but a little bit crazy. It did give me some mind map with core concepts, recycling overview, technology and equipment, legal compliance and environmental protection, policy, international integration, but with a Vietnam focus. Now, I don't know where on earth that came from. So,
okay.
A little bit strange there.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we always need to question the outputs, look for accuracy, look for bias, and that kind of thing. So, sounds like you did that there. Anyone else want to share before we move into the home stretch of our webinar? We've got just about 9 minutes left together, so thanks for hanging with me this evening. The sun is still up for a little bit. Let me share the screen again. Look at a few alarming things now. And this won't be surprising to any of you, that a 2024 Pew Research Center survey of students between the ages of 13 and 17 suggests that a quarter of teens currently use ChatGPT for schoolwork, which was double the figure from 2023. And we now find ourselves in 2025. So that percentage of teens using AI to help them with their schoolwork has probably only gone up even more. You might be experiencing that in your class. And I Read with horror not too long ago this headline from National Public Radio that 1 in 5 high schoolers has had a romantic AI relationship or knows someone who has. So I've already shared these slides with you, and if you open up the slides to show the speaker notes, anytime you see citation in speaker notes, you can grab that and open it to read more about what is going on here. I predict we're going to have young adult novels, young adult literature about this very topic very soon. There might already be some out there about people dating an AI robot. There are some potential perils with AI, and so I think I'd be remiss if I didn't at least provide a little bit of caution about there are risks with large language models. They can spread misinformation. Their outputs can sometimes be biased because they are trained on human writing, and whether humans realize it or not, they have their own personal biases that sometimes appear in their writing. There are privacy issues, copyright violations, and there is a cost to the environment. As a quick example, in a prompt to both Claude and ChatGPT, preparing for that food poetry workshop I mentioned earlier, I asked it for a list of poems about food by a wide variety of poets. And it told me, Adrian Rich, a poet I was aware of, has a great poem called Peaches. When I went looking for it, I couldn't find it because it didn't exist by her. Instead, it was by a poet named Adrian Sue. And then Juan Felipe Herrera, I was told he had a great poem called Rice and Beans. Couldn't find that, but I could find mention of a poem he'd written called I'm a Rice and Beans Kid. So the title was slightly off, but the full text was not available online. Then ChatGPT also spread a hallucination, misinformation by saying Anne Sexton, again, a poet I'd heard of, had written a poem called Eating Together. I knew for a fact Lee Young Lee, he had written that poem, not her. And then it also said Nikki Finney, an African-American poet, had written a poem called Chitlins, which she did not write, and as far as I could tell, no poet, famous or otherwise, has written a popular poem called Chitlins. And the fact that they would, I say they, like it's a person, but the fact that the tool, that ChatGPT made this claim, seemed not only like misinformation, but a bit biased as well. Then we also have these lawsuits going on where writers like Margaret Atwood, Stephen King, and others have had their works pirated, stolen by these tech companies, fed into their engines without any sort of monetary compensation, let alone permission. And so that can be problematic as well. And the data centers that run all these AI tools consume a lot of water, consume a lot of energy in that process. The circuitry, the wire gets so hot from all the processing that the wiring has to be cooled off. It's fed through a plastic tube, which is then run through a big giant tub of cool water so that the whole thing doesn't explode or burn down or whatever. So that's why there's water consumption in addition to greenhouse gas emissions. And then we'll skip over this and pop over here. This kind of circles back to our comment from the very beginning from Emily about it using AI, taking the heart out of writing. It takes the heart out of the act of writing. That was Lindsay who said that. Thank you, Lindsay. So the Oatmeal is an internet cartoonist who has a comic on AI art. This is just an excerpt from it where he says, someone once told me that art is like emotional nutrition. That made sense to me. Art feeds my feelings. And if that's the case, consuming AI art is like eating styrofoam. It's a farce. It wasn't made with all the pain and joy that goes into actual creation. So We should never totally outsource our thinking and our writing to an AI bot. It can be a thought partner, but it should never be a ghost writer. So I hope we can all kind of walk away with that. Also, this cracked me up. We'll laugh at Matthew McConaughey, and then we'll do our evaluation and be done. He said recently on a podcast that he wanted his own private large language model fed only with his own books, notes, journals, and aspirations, so he can ask it questions and get answers based solely on that information without any outside influence. And someone responded and said, "This is called your brain. You don't need a GenAI tool to tell you that." Okay, thank you for your time, participation. I'm going to put the evaluation survey in the chat box, and if you will fill it out, say that the name of the session is AI. I think the subject area, drop-down menu, secondary ELA is one of those options, and then the location is a webinar. So once you finish your evaluation, you are free to go. I'll hang around for just a little bit if there are any comments or questions. And Nancy, I'm going to put your digital hand down unless you had another question or comment. And thanks again, you all, for being here, for attending. Let me